Todos los asistentes están en modo de solo escucha.
Buenos días, saludos a todos. Good morning, hello to everybody. My name is Alfredo Alfaro, and on behalf of the company Ipsos, I would like to give you a warm welcome to this Ipsos webinar. This is going to be our first Ipsos webinar of this year. And today we're going to be transmitting this seminar through two different channels. We're going to have one for the people who are going to listen on Spanish, and they're going to listen a translator and this other channel. Everybody right now is on the mute mode in order to avoid any kind of distractions. So remember to use your tool, your window on the screen that can be used to write down your comments and questions when it will be required during the webinar. Today's presentation has been named as Closing the Gap Between What People Say and What People Do, to help you make better decisions about your consumers. As you know, identify what people really do instead of what they say they do. It is one of the biggest challenges that we face when we do studies on the consumer. Today, I have the honor to introduce Sue Phillips, who is our Global Insights for Ipsos UU. She's now in London, UK, and she will share with us her thoughts and recommendations about this important topic. I would like just to remind you to write down your comments on the Windows tool that you're going to have. So before we start, I just want to give you a time frame that we're going to spend around 40 or 45 minutes in total for this Ipsos webinar. Without any more delay, I would like to pass with Sue to start today's presentation. Good morning, Sue.
Hello there, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Alfredo. Hello, lovely to be with you. I wish it was actually closer, although the sun is shining beautifully today in London, so we really mustn't grumble that we don't have Caribbean weather. So yes, today I'm very pleased to be sharing with you one of the hottest topics, I think, in market research at the moment is how we address this gap that we face when we know, not that people are lying to us, sometimes people are unaware of some of the things that they do, and so we look in market research to get to the closest to what is actually happening and to try and understand that. So that's really the focus of this webinar today. And so I've organized it as follows. So we look at the say-do gap, and I share a couple of examples of how that can be very obvious in some typical market research situations and that we work on with clients. And then the way to address it is actually to get closer to people in real life, and the way we do that is via an approach called ethnography, which I think many of you may have heard of, but I'm trying to unveil a little bit about what ethnography is and why ethnography might be able to help you address some of your different business challenges. And then finally I go into looking at a spectrum of research approaches that we can use to actually address this say-do gap. Okay, so I think let me get going with the say-do gap. And there's no better place to start as an example with a piece of work we have done with a pet food company. Now, people don't eat pet food. Dogs and cats eat pet food, obviously, and they can't speak. So how can we understand what their needs are? Obviously, the answer is via the owner who make the purchases, but our client came to us with a question, where are the growth opportunities in the dog food business? So what kind of questions would you like to ask this dog? So you might say, would you like a snack? You know, do you give the dog a treat when they're looking at you like this? Well, of course you might do. Of course you'd give them a treat. And then if they will go away and they will have their treat that you've just given them and hopefully keep quiet for a couple of minutes and sit there and enjoy it. And it's very much a, you know, the dog owner gives the dog a snack and off they go. But what about when you're having a snack? What happens then? Now, I don't know how many of you on the line are dog owners, but my parents are big dog fans, and I know as soon as they go to the cookie jar, the dogs are there wanting their little piece. So they're actually coming much more closely to you and saying, give me some of that. And that's exactly what we experience. So in reality, sorry, a picture shouldn't be there, this is what actually happens. So we go to somebody's home and spend some time with them, and we start the conversation by what do you currently feed your dog now? And people will say things like, well, this is all the food he eats. I really want to give him the best stuff. And this guy actually talked about how he would give the dog the best organic dog food while actually denying himself as a human being that kind of food himself. So he really wanted to give the dog his best. And he only feeds him, he would say that he only actually feeds him this food. So this is all he will eat. This is all the food he eats. That is what he will say. But then when you spend some time with him during the day, you realize that actually he's sitting there having his lunch, and then he says, come on, you fancy a snack? And then he says, he's my pal. So while he's eating, he'll feed the dog a little bit of a snack. Then a bit later on, hey, you hungry? You're going to get some of my finest string cheese from Wisconsin. You fancy another piece? So he's feeding him a little bit of string cheese. A little bit later on in the day, hey, come on, let's have a snack. Gives him just a treat from a jar, doesn't really say very much. And then later on again, hey, want to share a banana? Come here. Another piece? Another piece? Gives them 2 or 3 pieces of banana. Now, ideally, I would have actually shown you the video, which is much more lively than me talking you through a number of screenshots. But technology isn't on our side on webinars for showing video, and you'd have all probably had a very unsatisfactory experience. But essentially, this is the sort of behaviors we would have observed, or we did observe actually, spending a day with somebody and getting beyond what the guy obviously was telling us, which is this is all the food he eats, when clearly that wasn't actually the case. So essentially, what he says is, taste of the wild, that's the only food he eats. I can't afford to eat all the organic stuff myself, but I want to give him stuff I can afford to give him, the best stuff. He's my pal. That's what he says versus what he does, which is feed him banana, feed him spring cheese, feed him some of his burger, etc., etc. So there's a gap there. So in research, we ask questions to help us understand what people do. So here's another example. How, when, and where do people measure their blood pressure? So that's a very valid question. Any healthcare manufacturer of a device to measure blood pressure might want to know, or anyone who's supplying drugs that will help with hypertension. And an answer you might get is at home, at the GP surgery, twice a week. So here, what we actually observe when we go into somebody's home and spend some time with them is that, oh, it's not actually her who's doing it. She might say, I usually do it in here, and then she'll go, excuse me, while he's actually trying to put it on there, getting a little bit rough with her because she can't quite put it on. So she's not doing it by herself. She says she checks her blood pressure once a week. If my blood pressure is good, I'm quite happy. So again, it has an impact on her emotional state, how her blood pressure actually is. Then he says, no, you have to do it a second time. They call it the white coat syndrome. Your blood pressure goes up when you see a white coat. Now, she was saying, I check my blood pressure once a week, but actually when she came to measure it, she actually measured it twice. So again, there's a gap there between what she's saying and what she's actually doing. And then she says, I'm very happy with that, thank you. And she writes it in her husband's book because she's actually lost her own book. So she writes her blood pressure number in her husband's book. And then finally, having had this rather frustrating experience with her husband, who's been taking charge of measuring her blood pressure, she says, I don't know if it's too high or too low, but if it's too high, it's probably because he's aggravated me. So again, there, when you're in the context of somebody, with somebody, doing something with them, you get a much bigger picture of the impact of the environment on their behavior. So 2 examples there, one of the dog finding some insights that you were different from what they were saying, and similarly here in the blood pressure example. So our ethnographic insight for her is he does it for her. She's in an emotional state, it's an emotional experience. She records her blood pressure once, he suggests twice, and she's lost her book. So very interesting, we found some good insights there. But so what? So why is that useful? So let's go back to the dog case again. In this case, it really showed that there was an opportunity for co-snacking behavior. So there's co-snacking that goes on, and an opportunity there that was totally new to our client. So what could they offer that offered a closer bonding moment between the owner and the pet that involved snacks? They definitely understood the tension that was motivating that behavior, which is the closeness between the pet and the owner, and it certainly helped them shape new and more precise questions for future ideation, but particularly for future quantitative work. So if we look here, by closing this say-do gap, we can ask better questions. So if you had asked the guy the question, how many times per day do you feed your dog? The answer would have been 2. Do you feed your dog human food? Yes. Okay, so that would have been the answer from just you know, a straightforward question. But actually now we know about co-snacking. Now we know that snacks are not really thought of as feeding. We also realize that he didn't admit to human food. We might ask the questions differently. How many times yesterday did your dog eat anything other than dog food outside of its scheduled feeding? Or you might have said, how many times yesterday did you or someone in your household break off pieces of food for your dog? And you'll get a much better representation of the actual behavior. So understanding what goes on can help shape your question, the questions you ask. And then following on from that, if yes, if you did feed your dog human food, what kind of food would that be? So meat, cheese, table scraps, again, very, very broad. But actually, the shareable form is important. So which of the following have you shared with your pet? Bananas, string cheese, chips, crackers, pieces of meat. So you would actually use the specifics that you might have identified in this ethnography to again shape a more closed-ended question. So that's how it can help to ask better questions. And from the client's point of view, their response was, we were going down the wrong path. I'm so glad we did this, because this was not the direction they were going in with their snacking innovation initiatives. And for the blood pressure monitor, the opportunities that were revealed there is that it's a product that can be used by partners, so don't necessarily assume there's only one person doing it, that there's 2 people. That they should record emotion at the same time as recording the blood pressure, because that will have an impact on the measure of the blood pressure. And obviously, if your emotion is high, so even if you just have a smiley face or something with a face with, you know, steam coming out of your ears, at least you'll know there might be a reason why the blood pressure was high, and not particularly to worry, because it's to do with your emotional state, not your actual physical state. Offer guidance on how many times to measure the blood pressure, because obviously they were measuring it twice, and she thought they were only there to measure it once. And record measurements electronically, because obviously it's unreliable to have the person have their book there at all times. It's easily lost. So again, some very clear actions from that. But I think it's very clear that although we focus on bridging the say-do gap, both say and do are important. And using ethnographic approaches helps us understand both. So let's deconstruct say and do a little bit. So we have what people don't do, but what they say, helps us understand people's projections. So people kind of, want us to believe a story about themselves, their projected self, the kind of image they want to create. Then do and say, basically look at actually what is going on and their feelings. But then actually to look at the do, what they do, but what they don't say, that can help you understand the learnt behaviors that they just forget to tell you because they are so unconscious. So by doing this, you can get a real, a total picture of what people are, what's going on in people's lives. So as I say, you can get the projected self, you get the everyday life, and perhaps the culture, the things that hide, the people that they're not aware of because they're just so automatic in their lives. So how you can act this is when you're looking at the person's projected self, you can think about how you would advertise or market to them. When you're looking at their everyday life, you can develop products that really meet their needs, and also you can look at what behaviors are existing and how you might want to change those. And then finally, if you want to look at what they're doing but what they're not telling you about, that can help you understand unspoken norms. It can help you understand the cultural relevance, which again can then feed back into advertising, marketing, and new product opportunities. So an example here is for, say, some tennis shoes or trainers. So people might say their projected self would be, I wear ASICS trainers because they're a trainer for proper runners. Even though I'm not a proper runner, I wear ASICS trainers because I actually want to be perceived by others and also by myself as a proper runner. And that's an advertising campaign there that demonstrates the it's a big world, go run it, might be how I would like to perceive myself as a runner, even though in reality I'm not actually quite that fit and healthy. And then everyday life, I like to work and I walk to work and I like wearing the most comfy footwear I can, so that's the reality. That's actually somebody who wants comfort, they want something perhaps that's not quite as runnery, but something that's perhaps a little bit more presentable, so they've got something that's really comfortable. And then actually you know that this is all possible because you've observed that underneath somebody's desk they've got about 5 different pairs of shoes, and that it's culturally acceptable for me to leave my work shoes under my desk and change when I get in, which allows me to wear my comfortable shoes to work, and also to think about the fact that I can then run at a different time and still meet my projected self. So you can see the different layers you can unpick by getting to this say and do gap. Okay, so now I've established the say and do gap and talked a little bit about ethnography. I just want to talk a little bit more about what ethnography is and how it works, because there's some very specific principles about how you can actually get to some of these insights. Because remember, the whole purpose is you can't actually just go and ask someone and they'll tell you. So you have to find ways of getting people to open up to you without actually them realizing they're opening up to you. So ethnography, for those theorists in our audience today, is actually a fieldwork technique within anthropology, which deals with the scientific description of individual cultures. So it's derived from the Greek, which is ethno, which means people, and it means graphy, which is to document. So it's basically about documenting people. And the most famous of all ethnographers was a guy called Malinowski, who spent a lot of time embedding himself in the lives of people in Papua New Guinea and in some very rural communities, and just spent time with them, observing them, talking to them, almost living their life in order to understand them and to walk in his shoes. And he described it as to try and understand the imponderabilia, which is a very long word that's very rarely used in English at all, which means the challenge of understanding everyday life. Whereas what we say, and again, there's quite a few words on this slide, but I hope it, you have some time to read it afterwards, but it's a qualitative research method derived from the fieldwork practices of anthropology. It's often characterized by its emphasis on spending extended periods of time with people, usually around 6 or 7 hours, with people or groups of people, to generate and create a holistic picture of cultural practices. Originally used as a method to understand tribes or cultures like Malinowski, today it is applied to understand any culture, including our own. Ethnography is employed to understand people's daily practices and routines in regards to products, services, illnesses, or brands. And specifically, it helps to make meaning from the mundane. So the things that you just think are normal, everyday, minutiae, actually can reveal some very interesting hidden insights. So that's really where our focus is. So what is it? It's situation-based. So you don't, it's not only based on the group profile itself, so who you want to speak to, so beer drinkers or diabetes sufferers or current bank account holders, but on situations where people actually experience the products that you make. So if we want to understand the behaviors related to beer consumption, we need to analyze what happens in homes, in daily situations, but also during parties, in bars, in restaurants and in streets. So you can imagine what fun it is to actually do ethnography for beer clients. So if there are any beer clients on the line, we're very happy to help you. But it's really about being situationally relevant. So if you're working for a breakfast manufacturer, you want to be there where people have breakfast. If you're in an on-the-go category, so whether it's carbonated soft drinks, you want to be out, spend time out and about with people, on the go with people, because that's where they're more likely to consume your products. If you're a motor manufacturer, you want to spend time in the car with people. So it's situation-based. And as I've said, it's described as an interpretive method which illustrates the difference between what people say and what they actually do. So we know, and I think if everyone on this call is honest with themselves, you might tell people outside that, I like to live a healthy lifestyle, but actually if you go into your cupboards at home, you'll find chocolate, salty snacks, high fat, and perhaps your exercise regime isn't as good as it might be. So we're trying to understand that gap, because where there is a gap, there will be tension, and where there is tension, there is opportunity for innovation. So it's an observational technique. It uses visual cues as data. It often uses video cameras to record what participants show us, and this is data. So it's not just what they say, it's what they do that we treat as data. But it's interesting, it's rarely purely observational. As many research projects, we need to understand the why as well as the what. So just looking at people doing stuff will not reveal this. So having conversations with people is very important still to understand the why behind the behavior. Although it's still described as an observational technique, because many of the questions that we ask are derived from observing what is their environment. So if you walk into somebody's house and you see a whole bunch of pictures of family there, or if you see some religious iconography there, or if you see a whole bunch of sports kit there, that will tell you something about that person, and that then triggers the conversation. We also say it's participant-led, which basically means we use participants' agenda, their daily routine, their work pattern, their shopping trip as a starting point for how our time is spent with them. It's their schedule, not ours. And this means that they will show us the things that are important to them, rather than us going in saying, well, here's our discussion guide, we want to ask you the questions that are important to us. So it's very much a participant or a people-centered approach. And then as the day unfolds, we can ask the right questions at the right time, making it not only more relevant to them, but also more in the moment, bringing us closer to the behaviors that we wish to know about, and also the behaviors that really matter to them. So we do it on their terms. And again, you know, you think about yourself, and when you meet somebody, it's you have a much richer experience if they're coming closer to you with either the questions they're asked, or you know, perhaps we'd like to go, where would you like to go, what would you normally do, is going to actually warm you more to them or more them to you than if you're just always working on your agenda. So the principles are the same with ethnography. And due to the length of time you spent with people, you build up a lot of empathy. So empathy is a very important tool, and it allows you to walk a mile in someone else's shoes to build this rapport with them. It's difficult to teach, and many respected anthropologists have said that ethnography chooses you, you don't choose ethnography, when referring to the use of empathy in interviewing. So you have to be able to step back and not have the me agenda on your head, but actually focus on the participant and understand what their agenda is. So ideally, it's best to only have one person in the field, because then the focus can be on building up that empathy and that rapport between the participant and the researcher and the ethnographer, because then they almost become like sort of, you know, friends, buddies, people who trust each other, and the empathy can be built in that way. So a nice summary here from a professor of anthropology: ethnography entails making the unfamiliar become familiar, whilst at the same time making the things that you think are very familiar to you, like a very everyday ritual, like having breakfast, or having a Christmas celebration, or booking a holiday, feel very unfamiliar just because of the way you deconstruct it. So again, think of the dog snacks, think of the blood glucose, blood pressure measurement. Actually, when you deconstruct what they actually did, it felt a little bit less familiar than it felt when you actually, if you didn't think about it in that way. The other important thing to talk about on ethnography before we stop for questions is that it's really, to make the meaning out of the data that's been collected, you need to have a lot of time in the field, and that needs to be done filmed, and so that you can use that as your data collection. So the main advantage of using video is that during the analysis process you can see the same thing, that other people can see the same thing that the ethnographer saw when they're in the field. So you have a team working on the analysis, and you derive your insights from all the visual data through your interpretation and analysis. So you're building a much better picture, and importantly, this picture can then be relayed back to our clients in a video format. Okay, so I'm just going to pause a second there to have a sip of tea, but as Alfredo said, there's a question box there, and I'm sure you may have thrown up several questions. Do you have any questions about the actual ethnographic methodology itself, how it's done, where it's done, you know, how do you get people to participate, anything at all? Very happy to take your questions. So please pop them into the question box, and then I will do my best to answer them.
Okay, we don't have any questions so far, but I will let you know, Sue, as soon as we have one.
Okay. Okay. While the team are, you know, while the questions are coming in, one of the things that somebody asked me yesterday, we're actually doing quite a bit of training at the minute with our teams on ethnography, is how can you get people to spend this amount of time with you and open up as much to you? That was the, you know, question. It's like, you know, why would somebody do that? And I think one level, obviously you pay them very well, although I'm sure they don't do it just for the money, but you certainly do pay them more than regular market research. But also I think when you are trying to recruit them, you open up to why you're doing it. You open up to say the reason we're doing this is that our client is very keen to understand some of the things you do in your everyday life that they may just not be aware of, and they may be big things or small things. So this is why we do this kind of work. So you need to open up quite a lot to them. And then secondly, during the recruitment process, you actually, as a researcher, you engage with people and you start to build up the rapport before you even get there. So when you arrive at their home, you've kind of got this buddy relationship that then makes it feel like a very natural day. And it's at its most, I've seen the most powerful ethnography in the area of healthcare and health and well-being, and when people have something to share about their diabetes or their cancer or their whatever it is they are experiencing, and it becomes almost a cathartic day. We've had the same experience with people in their cleaning and their obsession with their home cleaning as well. So it doesn't just have to be about health, but you know, actually, people love to share their lives with you if you build up the right environment or atmosphere. So anything at all from the audience, Alfredo, in terms of questions?
Yes, Sue, we have a question here. One says,
great.
it is possible to do ethnographies in other places rather than the home of the people involved in the study?
Yes, I think yes, you certainly can. So you can do it out and about. I think if they work for themselves, you can probably do it in their place of work. You know, if they run a stall or a garage or a shop or something like that, they would probably be able to give you permission. You can certainly do ethnography in a bar or a pub. I think the difficult areas we find are shopping. So doing ethnographies in stores, you probably, you know, you often get accosted by the store manager saying, what are you doing in here? So we sometimes need to restrict what we do there, although actually with today's mobile phones we have been known to spend time in store with people. We also have wearables, which are different kind of glasses that you can put on people, so that makes your observation less intrusive. So as long as the participant is aware that and gives permission to themselves being filmed, and you're using discrete filming, then that is certainly possible. But in formal workplaces, I think it's very unlikely that you'd be able to do it. So you know, obviously, you know, I can imagine an ethnographer coming along to work with somebody at Ipsos. It would just be very inappropriate, and I think that would be difficult. So yes, out of the home, but again, it's using some common sense as to what is culturally acceptable. But then that said, the home context often tells an awful lot of stories about a person, where they live, how their home is organized, who they live with, why they live with that group of people, why they live in the neighborhood that they do, what that tells you about the influences that come upon them, whether it's friends, family, media, TV, internet, etc. All of those things, the home will tell you a lot. So I think, yes, you can do it in other places, but I would always try and start with the home if I can. Good question, thank you. Any other questions at all, Alfredo?
Yes, Sue, we have another questions here. The next one says,
great,
like a kind of index to show the gap that is there usually between the say and the do?
Do we have an index? Is that the question? Is that sorry, Alfredo, I missed the beginning of the question. Is the question, do they have an index?
Yes, it refers to an index to show the gap that it is between the say and the do.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think the simple answer is no, because it's actually you know, a qualitative question. Because actually, if I think I think after you've done some research, you can identify whether the gap is small or large. So you can say, actually, when people measure their blood glucose, there is a small gap between what they tell you and what they do. Whereas with the dog food, you could say that it is a big gap between what they say and what they do. So it's possible to quantify in a qualitative way the gap, but I don't think I don't think we have developed an index for that, because I think it will differ by situation, it will differ by category, it will differ by person, it will differ by behavior, you know, so there are many variables to look at to determine what an index might look like. But again, I wouldn't say that there has never been one created, because I'm sure within the area of academia a lot of this kind of research is done very regularly, and I'm sure there will be something there. So I'm going to ask my broader team whether an index between say and do has ever been developed. So that's a nice question. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, anything else?
Yes, we have several other questions. I'm going to read it for you. The next one says, how do you select the ideal candidate for an ethnography study?
Okay, that's a very good question. So, and yes, it is important to pick the right person. So the person, first of all, has to be open. They have to be open to share. So having somebody who's very private, very shy, will not make a good candidate for ethnography. Having somebody who is typical of a target group is also important. So when I say typical of a target group, I mean if you're wanting to talk with a young mum with a couple of kids, then you know, make sure they are typical of what the broad cultural norm is for a young mum with a couple of kids. Because if you only have very small samples in ethnography, you do about 6 or 7 in a sample, so you wouldn't have hundreds of people to look at. So if you have outliers in your sample, then you will get a relatively diverse picture, and you won't get the same thematics coming through. So you want someone who's typical, open, articulate, but they don't have to be overly chatty. They just have to be willing to talk to you, that, you know, and willing to open up, as I said before. So those are the main things that we look out for, and just open and willing to share their lives. So that's the main thing.
Okay, another question we have here.
Yep.
How many cases are acceptable to analyze in order to have a conclusion? And the same person asked another question, which is, and how many days do we have to observe?
Okay, so here we sort of look for usually around 6. We start with 6 people. And again, because we're looking at behaviors and we're looking for themes across those 6 people, and I know if you've done quantitative with hundreds and hundreds of people, you say, well, how can 6 be enough? Actually, we are looking at individuals and their different behaviors and trying to understand how those behaviors do or don't influence what they do, and how they kind of reflect what people say. And so you're building a deeper qualitative understanding of human behavior. So you don't need to observe thousands of people in order to understand human behavior. In order to then quantify how much, how often, how many of those patterns of behavior, then you would need to quantify. But in order to understand, you know, the different behaviors, you don't need a huge sample. So usually we work with around 6. If you're, say, looking to look at men against women, then perhaps you would extend that to maybe 10. You do 5 men and 5 women and look at the differences between those groups. But again, you're not really looking at a huge sample. And how long you'd spend with them, usually we spend between 5 and 7 hours with people. So again, this is about commercial appropriateness, because yeah, it would be lovely to spend a whole week with them, but nobody would ever actually pay for that. So realistically, we spend about 5 hours. Sometimes we spend 3 hours on one day, and then the person goes away, does some work, and then we'll spend another couple of hours in the evening. Or we might spend 3 hours on a subsequent day at a different time. So you might spend the morning with them before they go off to work, and then the following day you'll spend the afternoon with them when they get back from work. Again, remember, you're trying to blend into their lives and their worlds and fit their patterns. Okay, I tell you what, I'm just concerned now about the really, really good questions. I was really impressed with this. This is fantastic. But I'm also concerned about time. So should I move on, Alfredo? And I'm very happy to answer the questions after the session.
Good, good.
Hello? Okay, okay. All right, super. So, why might you do ethnography in your world? Why might you look at doing some ethnography? So the main benefits you get from ethnography are understanding the context in which people live, so the world in which they live and how that impacts on them. You know, a simple example, somebody said to me recently, I never drink beer at home, but when I go on holiday, I always drink beer. That's very interesting. That's really interesting. Why is that? The context in which you exist will shape your behavior. And if we are not understanding the context in which people live, then we're missing a whole part of the story about why people do what they do. Obviously, observing behaviors, just as we saw in the examples I shared about the dog snacking, or the blood, what's it called? Measuring of their blood thing, and so looking at their behaviors. Blood pressure, that's what it is. Revealing the unarticulated, so things that people can't articulate, so they can't tell you that they're necessarily frustrated by their husband, or they can't necessarily tell you that you know, they feed their dog lots of foods they shouldn't, so you can reveal the unarticulated. Exposing emotional impact, like the fact that dog is his pal. He loves that dog more than probably his wife, and also the emotional impact, say, of the blood pressure. And then again, considering surroundings and the relationships that people have that influence their behaviour. So, understanding the context, putting into context the challenges faced every day, and perhaps the difficulties that of daily life that they have that are not voiced to others. The behaviours can be captured as they naturally happen. You can reveal both the automated and considered actions that perhaps they're not able to share with you. Exposing emotional impact, so revealing answers to those questions that are never fully answered by traditional means, that require time and intimacy. So, you know, let me get beyond hello, and let me get to know you a bit, and then I might actually tell you a bit more about myself, because you know what, I like you, I trust you, I'm happy to spend some time with you, and then I will reveal myself to you after you've built that trust. And then looking at the surrounding relationships and surroundings, as I said, the partners, children, friends, neighbours, and also that personal context, what your environment is like, how much space you have, will all help you build a fuller picture. So the best business situations for ethnography, the kind of questions you might come with is, I don't feel I'm connecting emotionally with my consumer. So how can I build greater empathetic understanding? Or you might say, I want to truly know my consumer beyond what they've told me in interviews. So you might want a deeper understanding. Or you might say, I want to see the influence behind my consumer's behavior. I understand my consumer only within my own category. So I make carbonated soft drinks, I sell current accounts or savings accounts, or you know, I offer airline services, but actually I want to look at the totality of someone's life and how my world collides with theirs. So those are the kind of questions where ethnography might be useful. So we use it, or our clients ask us to use it for fundamental understanding, so a holistic understanding of the consumer's world, to identify ways to position and communicate brands, so you make sure you connect with them in the way they live. New product development, so you can see just as the dog snacking example was there, you know, there's an opportunity for creating greater bonds with somebody, and so therefore innovations there. To understand a detailed understanding of the actual experience of a product or a service to identify areas for improvement. So just spending time with people, you know, going along to, you know, having an experience. We've done a fair amount of ethnography with airlines where we actually get people to experience the airline experience, although not always with a camera, but sometimes self-authored, sometimes accompanied, to just see where the gaps are. To bring your consumer to life, so just so that you can actually have the consumer in your room with you. The example we had recently was a deeper understanding of a particular patient's condition. So there were people in a pharmaceutical company who had never actually worked with patients who suffered from this particular disease, and so now they had that person in mind when they're working every day on identifying the drugs and how they might actually address those patients' needs. And then behavior change. We all know that most marketing involves some kind of behavior change, whether it's if you want people to change from a basic brand to a more premium brand, or if you want them to change and stop using tube sachets and start using tubes, for example, there will be behavior change involved there. So getting the wider context of why that behavior is happening can be done by looking at what the behaviors are and then identifying opportunities of how you can nudge people to change their behavior. So I think I will move on to the last section, and then I'll stop at the end for any more questions. You know, spending 5 hours with people and doing this 6 times and getting the video very, very well taken and then creating beautiful films as a result is a way of doing ethnography that is, if you like, at the Rolls-Royce end, and will get you a lot of depth and will get you a lot of understanding and will last for a long while. So doing a good foundational study is worth the investment because you can use it at time and time again. However, we don't always have the time or the money to do ethnography in its fullest, purest form. So we have a number of approaches to help us address this say-do gap. And as with always with research, it's about picking the right solution according to your actual need. So I've got some different examples and different approaches and different examples. So here the dimensions are really around pure ethnography, so you really are trying to, you know, live the life of the person and spend time with them, versus applied or derived ethnography, so something that uses some of the principles but is actually not quite the same as doing the full thing. And of course there is a consequence in terms of how much time and how much cost each has. So there's, as with all research, there is some kind of trade-off. So I'm just going to show you a few of the approaches which get closer to people to get to this say-do gap. So ethnography, the pure ethnography, I've spent a lot of time talking about this already. So observing behaviors, seeing the behaviors that matter, getting beyond what people are telling us. We spend a day with people filming everything they do to truly get to know them and dig below the surface. And really, you have an immersive day in the field, one-on-one empathetic view of them. It's participant-led rather than interview-led. Their schedule is our schedule, etc. You have a lot of data, a lot of hours, and you come out with this really amazing video. So that, you know, it is possible to do ethnography in that way, and and we have a case that I'll share with you, that I won't share with you now, but if you've got time afterwards, I highly recommend that you go to this link, which is our study that we did on people who suffer from psoriasis, which is a skin disease. And the reason I can share it with you is because it has been shared in the public domain at conferences, and basically it really helped this particular client address a very challenging area, because they got a much better view of what the patient's both physical and emotional condition was all about. So please take a look at that afterwards. And then we have something called immersions. So we do immersions. Qualitative experts with experience in observational research have been trained in some of these ethnographic principles. And what they will do is spend time in people's natural environment, and they observe behavior as well as ask questions. And they do informal, natural flowing sessions, and they're conversational rather than questioning, and they're people, not discussion driven. But we may use different technologies to actually maximize our ability to capture people in the moment. So we may use mobile apps, we may use spy glasses, and basically you spend time with people, and then you maybe leave some of these glasses with people, or you leave a mobile app with them, and that helps you fill in the time that you're not actually there, and obviously get some really good film to share with clients. So here's some examples of cases of immersions. So with one particular client, it was about how to communicate with the homemaker in developing markets. So where may there be opportunities for new products, particularly in this case for surface care. So this was the objective. The insight was, when you spent time with people at home, we observed environmental factors such as dust made cleaning really frustrating. So here's somebody actually wearing these shoes when they go into the house because they don't want to bring anything from the outside inside. It's a continuous process with no real end, and prevention strategies are used to prevent home from getting dirty. So again, the opportunity is that prevention is rich innovation territory in this particular market for this particular client, shifting the concept from cleaning as her sign of success towards prevention as being an access point worth paying for. So that was something we found from an immersion study where we just spent a couple of hours in someone's home. So we didn't spend the whole day with them, but we just spent a couple of hours with them. Again, this was something for an airline, so how to create a more seamless customer experience with travelers to drive greater loyalty to this particular airline. So we did high-definition journeys, so we spent time with them in person from home to actually getting to the flight, and then when they were on the flight we switched to mobile, where we had they actually captured their experience on mobile, and then when they finished the flight we actually had a Skype interview with them after the flight, which again revealed many of their frustrations. And an insight there was that there is a no man's land in key areas of the journey, because airlines operate pretty much on silos. So somebody looks after the in-flight service, who's a different team who look after the on-ground service, who's a different team who look after the lounge service, etc. So they could identify opportunities for new services to be delivered. And then our third case of an immersion is, again, after a soft launch, the client was planning to roll out a new food preparation product nationally, and they needed guidance on communication and positioning. So we actually went in home and we made them cook the product, and then we actually did go to store with them using spy glasses as well, and we looked at the product in the store. And what we found was that the product experience was sensorially very, very strong, and it was a very authentic tasting product, but the current format and the product descriptor and the positioning on shelf meant that people tended to dismiss it when they were in store. So they worked harder at the fine-tuning of the descriptor, did some in-store sampling, and positioned it in several different places in the store to help them maximize their opportunity and overcome those challenges. So just looking at product experience there. Okay, so another example is what we call cultures in a day. So this is where we get people, get teams of clients in a workshop environment to immerse themselves in the world of the consumer. So we would have some ethnography, which we've taken, so we'll use the ethnography footage, but here we actually bring live consumers into the session and immerse them in the world of the people we've actually done the ethnography with. So participants from client teams engage in direct conversation with people from these cultures in question and do activities usually undertaken by people living in those markets, so they can literally walk in the shoes of the people. So it's a very immersive environment. So it might take place in a couple of venues that are relevant to the culture we're exploring, and the sessions are facilitated and basically clients and consumers and facilitators work together to make sure that the outcomes are actionable. So here, if you want to inspire your teams to understand the lives of particular people, or if you want to bring a fundamental understanding of the nature of a market or a target group to life, and also it saves you money getting all your marketing people to travel off to different markets to understand people. So we did this with a personal care client. We looked at 4 different markets in a day. We had a full day of immersion across 3 locations to understand the meaning of premium in developing markets. Again, it's a different kind of approach to getting that level of close ethnographic insight where you might think people are behaving in a certain way, but actually you learn that they are not by getting closer to them. And another couple of final one, static cameras in home. So here we would provide and fit professional cameras in key areas. So this is a little bit like Big Brother style approach, third person observation. But it's really important that this needs to be complemented with some conversation in order to understand why. So yes, you might have a really unfiltered view, but just using the camera footage as data doesn't actually get you to the why. Similarly with wearables, you can give people glasses nowadays, you can put a GoPro camera on them, you can even get them to, so you can get them to take that with them wherever they go. It's an excellent approach to experience first-person view as it captures natural uninterrupted behavior, and it's as natural as possible, but again, you need the why to complement that. Online passive is something we've experimented a little bit in high online markets, developed markets, where we would use an app or a meter to track people's online behavior, because this is very difficult to film. This is very difficult to film unintrusively. So you need to see what people are doing versus what they say they're doing, and you can imagine the secrets that get revealed when you actually capture what people's online behavior actually is rather than what they say they do. But again, of course, you have to have willingness for people to have something installed on their phones or their devices to do this. And then finally, in the mobile space, we've got a number of, we've got an immersion app to allow the easy capture of behavior in context, so people can upload photos and videos along with their thoughts and feelings, any place, any time. So it's part push, like you ask questions and they will upload them, and it's part pull. Please share with us every time you have an ice cream, show the moment, take a video, take a picture, and so you get a really good contextual insight of what they're doing. We're doing more and more of this now as part of our quantitative surveys as well as qualitative. Actually you can take pictures of people experiencing products as part of a product test, just to get that real in context experience. Even if it's just a short glimpse, it can give you another dimension to your open-ended exploration. So, you know, there is a real spectrum from spending a whole day to getting an in-context glimpse for a couple of minutes of closing this say-do gap. Okay, so as I say, horses for courses, as we say in English. Pick the right solution according to your need. Okay, so any questions, final 5 minutes, that you might have about applying any of these methods to any of the different questions that you have, or again, any questions you might have at all about what I've shared today. So I don't know if there are any more left over from before, or we can fill the time answering those, or if there have been new ones.
Yes, thank you, Sue. We're on the top of the hour, but we have several questions. Maybe we can spend another 5 minutes to cover some
Yeah,
of them. And the other ones will
yes,
respond by email. We're going to send an email with the answer of
yes.
one of the other questions that we're not able to read today. There is a question here which says, if it is possible to do ethnographies in any social economic stratus.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. To be honest, yes, it should be. I mean, I think you might find it difficult with the very wealthy, just because of their, desire for privacy. Remember, one of the number one criteria is people are need to be open and need to be willing to reveal a little bit about themselves and their lives. And if they have a whole bunch of guards and cameras and high walls and, privacy settings on everything because they're frightened they're going to get robbed, then or basically exposed in the media, then I can't imagine very, very wealthy people doing it. But across the rest of the spectrums, we have actually done ethnography with, yes, financially challenged people in some very rural areas where there's no running water. People have animals running around the yard. They all have mobile phones, but we can certainly, Manilovsky style, do the lower end of social spectrum.
Okay, another question says, how much time is too much or not enough? Will this be depending of the project or the objective?
Yes, exactly. It is, and I think this is the thing. This is the $64,000 question that determines: do I really, to get to the depth I want to get to, do I need to spend a whole day and build that level of empathy to get to the thing I've never got to before? So to get to the snacking behavior, to get to the understanding of the blood pressure behavior, will that person reveal that to me in a shorter time? And I think a rule of thumb is, am I focused? Am I focusing on a particular set of behaviors that I know what I know? And know what I don't know. If I know what I don't know, then you can probably spend less time, because you say, I don't know how people clean. I don't know how people measure their blood pressure. So let me go to someone's home and let me observe a little bit about their lives, some context, and then let's do a little bit of cleaning, and then let's talk a little bit about some of the other products and brands they buy to do with cleaning, etc. So it's semi-observational, semi-questioning, because I know what I don't know. If you're in the realm of I don't know what I don't know, so you're looking even broader, then that's the time when you want to spend more time with people. So that business question was, how do I identify growth opportunities in dog food or any kind of dog food? Then actually spending longer with people, just understanding what happens in the world of the owner and the dog and the feeding and the relationship, etc., will get to that new place. So I think that, to me, is my rule of thumb as a researcher. I hope that helps.
Okay, we have one final question here, and
okay.
It says, how can we identify when the participant is not being honest?
Oh gosh, if I could answer that question, I wouldn't be sitting here. So yeah, that's a really, really good question. I could talk about that for hours. So so you can tell a lot, actually. You can tell by people's body language. often. So you can, somebody sort of is a little bit vague, somebody looks up to the ceiling, somebody looks in a different direction, so they're a little bit shifty. So, intuitively, most trained qualitative researchers have a sense of whether or not somebody is telling the truth. But I don't think people lie on purpose. They will tell you the truth they want you to hear. So somebody might say, so why did you buy that Mercedes? I bought that Mercedes because it's a very comfortable car, they will tell you. And you know that they bought that Mercedes because it makes them feel like a very important person. But they are not prepared to give that to you directly because it's private, because they perhaps haven't even admitted it to themselves. So therefore, as a qualitative researcher, stroke ethnographer, you need to dig beyond what they tell you and ask that question in a number of different ways. Projectively, perhaps, if Mercedes was a person, what kind of person would Mercedes be? Oh, they'd be a very rich, wealthy, successful man. Or you've told me that perhaps you're looking for something more than just comfort. But then you go to their home and you realize that actually their Mercedes is their representation of having arrived. They have a very small home, they have a very uncomfortable environment, but actually this is the way they can demonstrate to the world they have arrived. You see the contrast, you observe the pride with which they look after the car, you look at how they don't allow the children into the car or whatever it happens to be, and that will tell you what the meaning of Mercedes is. So it's not always just sitting there asking people a question and saying, you're not telling me the truth. There will be a reason why they are perhaps not telling you the whole truth, and that is the job of the qualitative researcher, the ethnographer, and actually the researcher to try and uncover that. So yes, there are some quick wins of body language and eye positioning and those sort of things, but actually it doesn't matter whether they're telling you the truth or not. You need to know why they are telling you their truth or what they believe to be their truth, and your job is to look for the answer there. So we sometimes think of ourselves as forensic explorers of understanding of people, and that's really that's why it's a $64,000 question, because you're really looking to not necessarily for the truth, but to understand what the tension is, why the tension exists, and how a brand or a company can actually address that tension with a solution. And so I think the truth is nice to know, but actually it's understanding what that tension is that can often be the answer to a brand need. So I think that's it. Actually, I'm just about to be booted out of my room, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. Well, it's been very nice. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions. It's been great to have some interaction, even though you're a long way away and I can't actually see you. So I hope that's been helpful.
Great. No, thank you very much, Sue, for your time. It is 9 minutes past the hour, so we need to finish the webinar. But I would like to thank of all the companies of Ipsos in Central America and the Caribbean for your time and these presentations.
Thank you.
Before we finish, I would like just to remind to the participants that we're going to run another Ipsos webinar throughout the year, so please be aware of this and hope that you can join us again in one of these presentations. Thank you once again, Sue, for your time and presentations, and thank you everybody.
Thank you.
A very nice days in London and in Central America and the Caribbean. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you.